degree. This matter was referred for a pre-sentence report and victim impact statement, and we're set for sentencing here today. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Douglas?
Yes, Your Honor. I believe we have reviewed the pre-sentence investigation report together with, and it's my understanding that the medical records in correspondence dated November 20th from the VA in Cleveland will be included along with the pre-sentence investigation report as part of the record. Given that, and it's my understanding the court has reviewed same, we would request the court to impose a term of community control sanctions in this particular matter without local incarceration. In Mr. Ryder's case, he is a decorated combat veteran of the United States Army. He is retired from the Army. He was deployed in Afghanistan and has 100% service-related medical disabilities. He has, and this was unaware prior to receiving the medical records, he had a significant psychiatric history, including a service-related post-traumatic stress disorder. I don't know how that interplays with the conduct that brings him before the court. However, what I am very certain of is that whatever terms and conditions of community control sanctions that you might impose upon this young man, that he will fully adhere to, including he is still in this receiving services from the VA, and he will be continuing to do so in the future. So we would, at this time, request the court impose a punitive sanction of community control sanctions without local incarceration.
All right. In light of the fact that Mr. Ryder has the right to appeal, Mr. Douglas, do you wish him to say anything at this point before I sentence him?
Your Honor, I would like to say a few words.
All right, what do you want to tell me?
Your Honor, and to everybody here today, I definitely apologize for the conduct of what happened that night. I definitely could have handled that better. I unfortunately had a extreme feeling of fight or flight. I didn't really feel like I had very much room to run away. I felt that I was in immediate danger. The state has brought up that I had taken possession from James Nye and that he was attacking me or he was upset with me for that. Unfortunately, I wish I could have testified to this. My anxiety was just way too high to speak that day or speak at all. The item in question was sitting on the table and he could have taken it. That's why I felt like James had approached me not for taking possession of what he wanted, but for, in some type of way, revenge or to show that he was upset with me. Like I said, I take full responsibility for my portion of what happened. And I miss my clients 100%. I miss working for NEO. I miss James especially. He's a very good kid. He just has sometimes anger issues, and I wholeheartedly wish the best for him. I love that job. I really did. I left a good paying job for that. I just really wish I could have handled that much better. I definitely do plan on adhering to whatever you say and continue with my VA psychiatric treatment that I've brought myself into. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but after sentencing, I had an attempt on my life that sent me into in treatment for psychiatric help for about 5 days.
I have reviewed those records.
Yes, sir. I really am not a bad person. I had a bad night. I think we all can agree that I had a bad night. With my history of trying to make myself the best person that I can. This does not reflect on who I am whatsoever. Thank you, Your
All
Honor.
right, thank you. Ms. Wood?
Thank you, Your Honor. Before the state makes its argument, the victim's mom, Barbara Nye, and victim's sister, Megan Nye, would like to speak to the court.
All right, just state your name and tell me whatever it is you want me to know.
Mad. Such a small word that is read or spoken, yet carries such a grand scheme of emotion. I am mad. I am unbelievably mad at you, Danny. I am mad at myself for trusting you. I am mad at myself for trying to make you feel included and welcomed in my parents' home or any family event you brought Jimmy to. I am mad that I tried to joke with you and make you laugh. I am mad that not only you broke my trust and my parents, but mostly Jimmy's. Not only did you literally charge at my brother, you also shoved him into a fridge and then proceeded to take him to the ground and further degrade him. You treated him like a rabid animal, and you were hoping, knowing that my parents would be out of town, that they wouldn't be able to see the physical results of your brutal assault. As if that reasoning wasn't horrific enough, you tried to capitalize on the fact that because Jimmy is nonverbal, he wouldn't be able to tell anyone what happened to him. But you were wrong. Even though Jimmy couldn't tell his school staff that you had hurt him the next day, they could see the evidence of your assault on him. And even though my parents were out of town, we would discover the documentation of the assault that was caused by your two hands. When I received a frantic call from my mom on December 12, 2022, that NEAS found a video of the altercation between you and Jimmy, I told my mom that I would leave work immediately and come over to view it. As an intervention specialist by trade, I work with students daily that are similar to Jimmy, and am fully trained in the utilization of restraint. I understand that restraints need to happen sometimes. I am also fully aware that sometimes restraints cannot look pretty, and that they should never look good, because if they do, then they probably weren't needed in the first place. I even spoke with both of my parents before I viewed the video evidence that I might need to watch it a couple of times to possibly see if it was just a tough restraint utilized. At this point, I still trusted and defended you. Yet, after watching that video, it was apparent that it wasn't a tough restraint, because nothing you did showed you following any form of protocol that is utilized to help support any individual going through a crisis. Let's call it what it is, Danny. You beat the shit out of my brother, Jimmy, because he wouldn't put his PJs on fast enough for you. And not only did you do that, but after the fact, in the 8-minute video your lawyer made us watch multiple times during the trial, did I see you make an attempt to apologize to him. What you did instead was ignore his multiple requests to call my mom. Where in the video, you can see him point to his eye, then to the kitchen, and then put his hand to his ear and say, "Mom, Mom, Mom, Mom." He wanted to call her because you hurt him, and he knew what you did wasn't right. If your continued disregard for my brother wasn't enough, you then prompted him to hug you goodnight. If you thought that for a moment that was a suffice as an apology to your heinous actions, I would reassure you it is not. Over the past 11 months, I have watched my parents suffer and become shells of themselves, and you did that to them, Danny. And I continue to just plainly be mad at you. Because you didn't just hurt one person in my family, you hurt multiple. Since that day in December, I still wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of my brother crying out in pain while you assaulted him. That sound is forever etched in the deep core of my brain and will never go away. Nor will I ever be able to erase the image of my dad's face as pain and heartbreak came across them as he listened to Jimmy cry out as you assaulted him. Or the fact that instead of my mom being able to solely focus on celebrating Jimmy's 21st birthday or his graduation, she had to prepare for this trial and relive what you did to him for the past year. All of which is wholly unforgivable. So, Danny, for you to be incarcerated for a period of time doesn't seem like too much of an ask to me, given all the damage you have caused to the same citizens you once made an oath to protect while serving in the Army.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Barbara Nye. Good afternoon, Your Honor, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to address the court. December 8th, 2022, and the past year will forever be etched in the minds of my family as days of tremendous heartache, severe emotional trauma, overwhelming feelings of guilt and grief, lost income, and the loss of trust in people we chose and put in place to care for our son, Jimmy. In addition to dealing with all the trauma of the initial news and investigation into the assault of Jimmy, we could not move forward and begin the healing process. Because Mr. Ryder lied about his involvement for several days and would never legally admit to his assault on Jimmy, we were forced to endure 11 months of an extremely stressful, frustrating, and traumatic legal journey trying to bring accountability to Jimmy's assailant. Had Mr. Ryder been forthright and honest from the beginning, or had agreed to take accountability for his actions when he was offered a plea deal months ago, we would never have had to continue to be traumatized all of these months after the initial assault. All we wanted was to put this experience behind us and get back to normal. But Mr. Ryder would not acquiesce to the evidence against him, and he put our family through a trial that was unnecessary. What is even more egregious is that Mr. Ryder served in the military, taking an oath to support and defend, to serve and to protect. Yet he attacked a disabled person, lied for days, tried to divert attention away from himself, and continued to put our family through months of anguish and turmoil. Certainly not the behavior you would expect from a member of the armed forces. The physical assault of Jimmy by a trusted aide was one of our worst nightmares as a family caring for a child with special needs. Over the past 21 years, my family has built an incredibly strong and special bond as we have all worked together to create a protective cocoon around Jimmy, hoping to do our very best to keep him safe from anything or anyone who would harm him. Knowing that he was especially vulnerable because of his inability to speak, as well as his low cognitive abilities, we have become Jimmy's voice, Jimmy's intellect, Jimmy's advocate, and Jimmy's protection. Because of this special bond, what affects Jimmy also affects each one of us on a level that may be difficult for most people to understand. As much as this is a victim's impact statement on Jimmy's behalf, I needed to also encompass the significant impact this assault has had on our family. As mentioned above, what impacts Jimmy impacts all of us. We have lost sleep, wondering what more we could have done to protect him. We have experienced incredible trauma, emotion, and distress watching the video and seeing the pictures that showed the progression of Jimmy's injuries after his insult. We have experienced physical effects of stress and trauma, such as insomnia, anxiety attacks, migraine and stress headaches, as well as irritability and agitation. We have missed many days of work for a myriad of reasons as a result of Mr. Ryder's actions. Meeting with NEOS staff to try to determine what happened to Jimmy, taking Jimmy for medical evaluation, phone conferences with Jimmy's special needs attorney, meeting and interviewing with Courtroom police and the Courtroom prosecutor, attending pre-trial hearings, having phone conferences with the Lake County prosecutor, attending in-person meetings to prepare for trial, attending the trial, and finally attending the sentencing hearing. My family and I have had to utilize the majority of sick and personal time in order to navigate the days immediately following the assault, as well as to participate in the various stages of the legal process. Throughout the recent trial, we have been traumatized all over again, having to experience 2 days of emotional testimony, sitting with the assailant in the same room, looking at the video and pictures of the assault again, and listening to the defense attorney and his tactics to try to twist the truth of what happened. We felt such grief and guilt as a family for many months after the assault because we failed to protect Jimmy. And the experience of going through this trial just brought back all those feelings and emotions. As everyone knows, you do your best to protect your children against the evils of the world, and that responsibility is magnified 1,000% when you have a special needs child. You lie awake at night wondering what his life will be like. You know you cannot always be there to care for him. You know he will always need to rely on someone to care for him and have his best interests at heart. You question all the decisions you make, wondering if your choices will improve his quality of life. It is a dark and unimaginable moment when you learn your special child has not only been severely harmed, but the harm was perpetrated by someone you implicitly trusted with his care. Mr. Ryder not only assaulted Jimmy, but he further abused our trust in him as he continued to hide his assault of Jimmy for 6 days, purposefully misleading, and diverting attention away from himself. He only admitted to the aggression after he was confronted with the evidence of the videotape, and he continued to lie about the details of the incident and wrote a false report of the events that occurred that did not match what was seen on the video evidence. Upon Mr. Ryder's viewing the videotape and seeing his apologies to Mr. Sharp and Mr. Tierney in text messages, we felt that Mr. Ryder would plead guilty and accept the consequences for his actions. At this point, we were considering some level of compassion in his sentencing. However, we were so very disappointed and dismayed to learn that Mr. Ryder was going to possibly file assault charges on Jimmy. Refused to plead guilty, vigorously fight the charges against him, and not accept the plea deal offered to him, which put us all through many more months of additional stress, pressure, and anxiety. The impact and the harm that was done at the hands of Mr. Ryder will forever change the relationships and trust we have in all who care for Jimmy. We've always tried to make Jimmy's care staff aware of our deep gratitude, knowing that they could suffer injury while trying to keep him safe. We have always welcomed staff into our home and family gatherings. Because of the heinous actions of Mr. Ryder, I know it will take time to rebuild that level of trust with those who care for him. It is also difficult emotionally and financially to have to install expensive cameras in all areas of Jimmy's apartment and in the new home he will be moving into. But the significant financial cost we have incurred is a necessary step in keeping Jimmy safe, as well as rebuilding trust in our staff. I can only imagine what Jimmy feels about what happened to him, especially when the assault was perpetrated by someone he trusted to care for him. In the video footage of the assault, Jimmy was trying to communicate that he wanted to call me when he put his hand to his ear and stated, "Mom, mom, 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 mom." And he wanted to tell me that he was injured when he pointed to his arm. As evidenced in the video, you can see him flinch. And I do know from his aide that he was jumpy and nervous for many days. Also evidenced in the pictures displayed in the court, he did spend many days in pain recovering from his physical injuries. We will never know the lasting impact this crime has had on him, but we do know the lasting impact it will continue to have on us as a family. My daily prayer is that his low cognitive abilities do not allow him to comprehend the gravity of what happened to him, or remember what pain and suffering he went through to heal physically and mentally from this assault. In conclusion, as Jimmy's mother and his guardian, it is my responsibility to ensure that Jimmy's voice is clearly heard and that justice is finally rendered on his behalf. As stated before, had Mr. Ryder cooperated and accepted the consequences for his actions at the beginning of the investigation, we would have had compassion for him. However, our feelings have changed drastically as we have seen for the past year that Mr. Ryder has tried to do everything in his power to avoid being held accountable. When deliberating on Mr. Ryder's sentence, I ask you to take the following into consideration. The initial attack and assault on Jimmy. The actions and inactions of Mr. Ryder after the assault. His continued excuse of acting in self-defense and putting the blame on Jimmy for the past year. Trying to use Jimmy's behavioral, speech, and cognitive disabilities against him. The traumatic ordeal that our family has had to endure for almost 1 year because he refused to accept any accountability for his actions. So, on behalf of Jimmy, I beseech you and I implore you and the court to finally hold Mr. Ryder completely accountable for all of his heinous behavior since December 8th of last year by sentencing him with the severest penalty that the law will allow for felony assault in the 4th degree. Hopefully, time spent being incarcerated will allow Mr. Ryder the opportunity to come to terms with what he has done and what his actions have done to the lives of Jimmy and my family. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Ms. Wood?
Thank you, Your Honor. On behalf of the state, this is a case where the defendant was entrusted to provide care, protection, support for James Nye, who is a functionally impaired adult and does not have the ability to self-protect and vocalize and support himself. The family here did everything that they possibly could to set Jimmy up for success. They had cameras in the apartment to help him, to watch him, and make sure that he was okay, but the defendant violated that trust when he committed this assault against him. The iPad that Mr. Nye uses, and there's significant testimony about this, is very important for Jimmy. It's his main tool to communicate. There was testimony about all the other instruments that Jimmy had used prior to having this iPad and how great of a stride that he has made when he was able to learn how to use the iPad and communicate with it with his friends and family and caretakers who are frequently with him. The defendant removed that iPad from James's hands and he walked around the corner into the kitchen area. That is where the assault occurred. And the video shows the state's position that the defendant advanced towards Jimmy, tackled him, and then took him to the ground. The defendant's behavior after this, to several people around him, his bosses, his coworkers, he said nothing happened, until he was confronted with the fact that his employer, NEOSS, had a video of what happened. And then the story changed that he was attacked. The victim here suffered physical harm. The testimony in the exhibits at trial showed that he had many scratches on his face, he had abrasions, he had a black eye. When the family was informed about what happened, they did take him to the hospital for an evaluation at Hillcrest. His injuries were exacerbated because of his limitations here. He's not able to communicate what had happened to him or protect himself. The defendant's relationship with Mr. Nye facilitated the offense. He was his sole caretaker. He was the one responsible for his safety, and he violated that trust. The defendant does have a limited criminal history, one prior conviction a number of years ago, but the defendant took advantage of his position and he assaulted Mr. Nye, who could not speak for himself. He couldn't help himself during the attack or after. The state's recommendation is for community control with local incarceration. We'd also recommend a no-contact order if this court does place Mr. Ryder on a community control, not a no-contact order with James Nye, his family, and their residents as well. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I've reviewed the pre-sentence report. I've also reviewed the records, the VA records that were submitted to me today. Those will be made a part of the record. I reviewed the victim impact statement of Ms. Nye. I've listened to Ms. Nye and Megan in court here today. Listened to Mr. Douglas, Mr. Ryder, and Ms. Wood. One thing I would note that perhaps the only people that know this about the way I conduct criminal proceedings from start to end, except I would imagine Ms. Wood is aware of this, maybe Ms. Gold, probably the bailiff, is that when I sentence somebody for a conviction, I make no distinction between whether that individual pled guilty to something or went to trial and was found guilty of something. It doesn't, and I will tell you from my experience practicing law for 28 years in the criminal area before I got here, that probably a good 75% of judges who handle criminal proceedings do make that distinction and do impose a harsher penalty because somebody goes to trial. I do not do that. I don't believe in that because that's a clear violation of somebody's constitutional rights, because whether Mr. Ryder is charged with an offense, or Mr. Gonzalez is charged with an offense, or I am charged with an offense, there is a presumption of innocence, and everybody has the right to a trial. The right to a trial gets obliterated if a person who affords himself of that right goes to trial and gets penalized for it. So I want to let you know at the outset that while it was and I imagine that, Ms. Nye, you and your husband and your daughter have never sat through a criminal trial before. Most people who sit through a trial, it's their first experience, okay? So it's a different proceeding than you've ever been a part of, I'm certain, okay? It's a whole different set of rules, and the rules are designed to make sure that not only the state gets a fair trial, but the defendant gets a fair trial. So that's where this whole process comes from. Now, Ms. Wood had a job to do in this case. Mr. Douglas had a job to do in this case. And those jobs are polar opposites. The state's trying to prove beyond a reasonable doubt what they've alleged. And Mr. Douglas, on the defense, is trying to convince a jury that it wasn't beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, that's simply the system that we have, okay? So I don't think Mr. Douglas did anything improper during that. If it were out of bounds for him to request that video be played multiple times, then I wouldn't have let him play it, okay? But I want you to understand the process and where I come from in this whole thing. Okay? Now, this is a felony of the 4th degree because of Jimmy's status. Otherwise, it's a misdemeanor of the 1st degree, okay? So there's a special duty that Mr. Ryder had to adhere to with regard to the care of Jimmy. And he didn't do it, okay? And the jury found that he didn't do it. Now, as I sat here, and this is kind of a rarity because I heard all the evidence that there was to be heard in this case. Usually, I hear very limited evidence on a plea, and so I don't have the full scope. But I sat here during this trial, and I say this in the context that Mr. Ryder and what he did was completely wrong and completely out of bounds. Okay. I also observed as I sat here, and whether anybody thinks this or not, I think it, that NEO Support Services did a disservice to Jimmy in the way that they conduct their business, the way that they train their workers. They did a disservice to Jimmy, and they did a disservice to every individual who is responsible for caring for Jimmy and others in that situation. Okay, so I found their lack of training and controls to be alarming, quite frankly. Okay, but all that being said, Mr. Ryder was in that position that he had to take care of Jimmy. Okay. And for whatever reasons that happened, whether it was frustration, whether it was, as Mr. Ryder indicated earlier, a heightened level of anxiety, that isn't an excuse for what occurred. Okay. The question becomes, what's the appropriate sentence for the offense in light of all the factors? In light of what happened to Jimmy, in light of Mr. Ryder and his involvement, his actions, and his background. There are a number of factors that I have to consider in this case. And I'm telling you all this because I'm trying to give you my perspective on things. There are a number of statutory factors that I have to consider. There are and I'm considering in this case 29-29-11, 29-29-12, and 29-29-13. Those all relate to factors that exist not only in this case, but every criminal case that the state legislature says has to be taken into account. Okay. One of the factors is this is a felony of the 4th degree. So there's a presumption in this case, and there's a recommendation from the state and from the defense that Mr. Ryder be placed on community control. Okay. So that's kind of the backdrop of where things are at. Now, Mr. Ryder lost his cool and caused the injuries to Jimmy. Okay. Now, you're correct in that Mr. Ryder would have been a hell of a lot better off everybody would have been a lot better off if he had made that call to